Eric Peterson with Arborist here. Today's weekly business tip is all about pollution liability insurance. Now, no matter what your operations are in the tree care industry, you have some exposure to pollutants. It could be from operating chainsaws and equipment in the field, to having a fuel tank on site, or even just changing your oil for your vehicles on site, to applying chemicals. There's a number of different ways that you as a tree care company has an exposure to creating a pollution event and therefore being liable or responsible to pay for the remediation. So in this article, we go through a few of the most common exposures to pollution that a tree care company faces and what insurance company or policy I should say, that you can purchase to help protect yourself from that. So overall, pollution liability insurance protects the business from an actual liability or alleged liability to a pollution event, that something that they did or work with, something that you cause a pollution event. The coverage protects against contamination, water, soil, property, as well as bodily injury or property damage. Sometimes pollution policies actually pay for gas or airborne pollutants. If some person is working or standing next to your hot, heavy equipment that's throwing out the exhaust and they pass out and they smack their head on the concrete, that essentially is a pollution exposure that's covered under a pollution liability policy, not your general liability. So in the 1980s, pollution liability used to be included on a lot of the general liability policies. No longer anymore. Now you have to buy a separate policy. So in simple terms, a pollutant is any substance that's discharged or ends up somewhere where it shouldn't be. Now, you think toxic stuff, you think gasoline and bar oil and all that stuff, but it could be water. And living in America's dairyland, we know milk is considered a pollutant if it gets into the watershed, if it gets into certain areas. So any substance that's in a new area that causes a problem in an area that it shouldn't have been is technically considered a pollutant. Many tree care companies have herbicide-pesticide applicator coverage. Herbicide-pesticide applicator coverage is great when you're applying the chemical. It does not cover, however, if you're transporting the chemical in a vehicle or walking down the row of trees with it. Herbicide-pesticide applicator coverage is only when you're actually doing the application. If you apply the wrong chemical or the wrong amount, that's covered. So when you're working on the job site, that's a limited coverage that's already built into that. You can get a contractor's pollution liability policy to cover you while you're transporting it, but also while you're sitting on the job site if your tank leaks or something happens where you don't have the cap screwed tight and it all drains out, whatever might happen that way. Pollution liability policies do cover your legal defense and certainly the remediation of the pollution, the soil, the watershed. If you do have a fuel tank on site, a lot of tree care companies have that. First of all, make sure that you understand the ownership of the tank. Sometimes the provider of the gasoline or the fuel, they own it and they will insure it and they'll have their own liability. But if your contract doesn't have that or you own it outright, you need to make sure you have a tank pollution liability in case there's a spill there. I know most have concrete barriers around so a vehicle can't damage that tank, but weird things happen. And if you have a leak that develops from a fuel tank, you need to have a tank pollution policy. Along the same lines, again, if you're transporting chemicals in a vehicle, your bar oil, your chainsaw gas, certainly that's a type of coverage that you can be covered under your business auto policy alone, called the broadened auto pollution. It's a great way to cover you when you're transporting over the road. So those are just a few of the common exposures that you face every day as a tree care owner. Please look through the article, read through it, and ask us any questions if you have in regards to pollution liability and what your exposures are and what we can do from an insurance coverage to take care of that. So you don't have to write a huge check to the Department of Natural Resources for cleaning up the local stream because you had some chemical from your plant healthcare tank leak and get into the watershed. So thanks for listening. Please be safe out there. We'll talk to you soon.